The morning broke with a stubborn drizzle over the red clay rooftops of Nyo a village nestled between tired hills and the endless chatter of birds awakening to another restless day. The sky wore a gray shawl, the kind that hovered low and clung to treetops, heavy with unshed rain. Puddles filled every pothole, and the cracked, winding village lanes turned to soft mud as children leapt across them barefoot, holding satchels made of torn plastic and dreams stitched into their tattered uniforms. Vendors in the bazaar swept yesterday's dust off their wooden stalls, arranging roasted groundnuts, dry maize, old clothes, and cracked mobile phones as if they were treasures of great worth. The scent of burnt firewood mingled with the sharp aroma of fermented cassava, creating a thick air that wrapped around every step and breath. In this vibrant chaos, amidst voices that shouted over one another and goats that weaved through people's legs like ghosts of forgotten rituals, moved a girl named Kwame. No one knew if it was a real name or one given by the old woman who found her crying in a torn bundle by the market trash heap 16 years ago. The only clue to her origin was a silver chain too tight around her ankle, engraved with nothing but the number 7. She walked barefoot despite the cold, her dark skin smooth, but hardened at the soles, her eyes wide and quiet, absorbing everything without demanding to be seen. Her hands were always busy, washing pots behind the food stall, carrying water from the stream, sweeping under mango trees where children played, but she was never invited. She didn't speak much, not because she couldn't, but because nobody asked her to. Her sister, Zuberi Chua, was her shadow. They never parted. If Kwame was sweeping, Zuberi carried the broom handle. If one cried, the other wiped tears silently. People called them the Bin twins, sometimes in jest, mostly in cruelty. They whispered behind their backs, "The party girl's shame," or "Those cursed children from the devil's night." Stories had swirled over the years about a wealthy woman from the city who came for a party at the village lodge, heavy with pregnancy and dripping with perfume. The tale said she danced until her water broke and her shame spilled into the world. 2 girls she stuffed into a plastic bag and threw away like leftovers. But no one ever proved it. The woman vanished before dawn, and the girls survived. They were raised by Mama Chikondi, a widowed herbalist who had nothing but a leaking roof, a broken mortar, and a kindness that could stretch beyond hunger. She never called them trash. She called them gifts the world refused to unwrap. Still, not everyone shared her grace. Boys mocked them, girls turned their noses. Women in the market pinched their noses when the girls passed, claiming they brought the smell of rot, even though they were always cleaner than most. Teachers barely remembered their names. One morning, as Kwame carried a basin of boiled cassava across the lane, a boy with crooked teeth hissed behind her, "Careful not to drop your sisters back into the bin." Laughter followed like a thundercloud, heavy and slow. Kwame paused. Zuberi's hand gripped hers tighter. She didn't turn, but her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something older, colder, a knowing, a flicker of something that would later become fire. That morning, under the drizzle, a man in a black coat paused across the lane. He had come from the city, but he stood like he belonged to no place. His eye settled on the girls, then on the old silver chain still biting Kwame's ankle. He didn't smile, he didn't speak, but the stare lingered, like a question not yet asked or an answer someone wasn't ready to hear. And just like that, the world that ignored them had started to notice. The days after the stranger's stare were restless ones. The village of Mimbal carried on as always, chickens squawking freely, mothers pounding millet with the rhythm of old songs, boys playing football with a stuffed sock, and elders arguing under the tamarind tree. But in the shadows, something had shifted. The man in the black coat, who many began to call Mr. Chidi, returned again and again. At first, he stood at a distance, speaking to no one, always watching. Then one morning, he walked straight into Mama Chikandi's compound, ducking under her sagging lintel with an air of quiet determination. "I want to speak with the girls," he said. His voice was firm, not unkind, but steady like a judge. Mama Chikondi looked him over with a healer's eye, not just his clothes or his face, but something beneath them, something in his spirit. And then she nodded once and called for Kwame and Zuberi, who were in the back peeling yams. Chidi studied the girls for a long while, his eyes narrowing slightly when he spotted the silver chain on Kwame's ankle. His silence stretched so long that Zuberi reached instinctively for her sister's hand. Finally, he spoke. "What do you know about where you came from?" Kwame answered without flinching. "From the market bin, wrapped in a party bag." Zuberi added, "That's what they say." Chidi's lips tightened. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and handed it to Mama Chikondi. It was a photograph, blurry, taken many years ago. In it was a woman in a short silver dress, belly round with pregnancy, holding a champagne bottle in one hand and flashing a smile that never reached her eyes. "I think this was your mother," Chidi said. The air thickened, and even the goats outside went silent. Her name was Amahle Mbeki, a once famous socialite in Nairobi, known more for scandal than sense. Years ago, she vanished after a party in Mbale. No one saw her again, and most believe she overdosed or escaped to another country. But Chidi, an investigative journalist haunted by stories that didn't sit right, had followed whispers, bribes, and old hotel receipts to find the thread. That thread led to the trash can and to the twins. They left you with nothing, no name, no voice, no place. But that doesn't mean you don't belong somewhere, he said. He didn't offer money or apologies or promises, but what he gave was more dangerous in when a question, one that lit a spark. What if we could be more than what we were born into? That night, Kwame and Zuberi lay awake, staring at the thatched ceiling, hearts pounding with something new. Not fear, not even hope. Possibility. The following week, Chidi returned with something wrapped in a rough cloth sack. A second-hand laptop, a solar battery, and stacks of old textbooks from the city. "If you want to know who you are," he said, "start by learning everything they tried to keep from you." Thus began their quiet rebellion. Kwame and Zuberi learned in darkness. While the village slept, they huddled over the glowing screen like moths drawn to forbidden light. At first, they typed slowly, stumbling over keys, mispronouncing words, reading sentences 10 times to make sense of them. But they refused to stop. While their classmates memorized spelling lists, the twins were watching online lectures about coding, digital design, storytelling, and finance. They read about women who rose from ashes, real women, African women, who built schools, apps, empires. In school, they kept silent. Let others laugh. Let them call them rubbish girls. They were planning something deeper, something no one saw. Roots. By the time they turned 17, they had built a small website, just a blog at first, where Kwame wrote short stories in English, Swahili, and Bantu. Zubri illustrated them with hand-drawn art and uploaded them as ebooks. They called it Sisters of Dust, a name whispered to them once by Mama Chikondi, who said, "You rose from dust, so you will never fear falling into it." To their shock, the story spread. First, a teacher in Nairobi emailed. Then, a woman in South Africa who ran a publishing network. Then, a tech incubator in Ghana offered them a digital mentorship. Every time their stories were shared, money trickled in. Not much, but enough to buy stronger internet bundles, better tools, and more books. But the village saw none of it. People whispered even louder now. How can girls from the bin own laptops? What are they doing at night that their eyes shine like devils in the morning? Even Mama Chikondi was summoned to the elders. "Keep your girls quiet," they warned. "They'll bring shame again." Then came the night the pastor's son Jabari tried to steal the laptop. He came with two friends, all half drunk, thinking they'd take it and sell it in the city. But Kwame heard the noise and stepped outside, machete in hand, not to threaten, but to stand. Zuberi stood behind her, holding a burning piece of wood from the cooking fire. Their silence, their eyes, steady, defiant, made the boys freeze. Jabari muttered something about witchcraft and fled. The next day, the village was split. Some began to fear the girls. Others, secretly, started to admire them. But the real turning point came months later when the twins launched an online marketplace for handcrafted art and stories from forgotten villages, not just their own. They called it Dust Gold. The idea was simple: empower artists in poor communities to share their creations with the world. Kwame wrote the code. Zuberi handled outreach, branding, and visuals. At first, they had only 5 sellers. Within a year, they had 50. Orders came in from London, Lagos, and even Los Angeles. They registered the company under a trust using Chidi's lawyer. They didn't use their real names yet. The pain of their past still clung too tight. But every shilling earned went back into the business. And to Mama Chikondi, who had started sleeping on a proper mattress for the first time in years. Then the local radio caught wind of their work. An interview was requested. For the first time, the girls sat in a recording booth, nervous fingers tapping against wooden chairs, answering questions about their dreams, their work, their roots. When the host finally asked, "And where did you girls come from?" Zuberi looked at her sister. Kwame smiled faintly. "We came from where people throw things away," she said. "But nothing stays in the bin forever." The interview went viral. Overnight, Dust Gold's traffic tripled. So did the hate. But so did the offers. Investors, journalists, publishers. Some genuine, some greedy. But the twins moved carefully, quietly. They trusted no one fully except themselves. It was around that time that Amalembeki reappeared, the woman from the photograph. Still glamorous, still cold. She had seen the interview. She recognized the eyes. Her lawyer sent a message first, requesting a DNA test, then a letter. Then she arrived, in a black SUV that parked at the edge of the village like an alien spacecraft. The same woman who once discarded them like garbage now stood in their presence with trembling lips and glassy eyes. "Let's talk," she said. Kwame and Zuberi didn't move. "Please," she added. "I was young. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a mother." Kwame's face was unreadable. Zuberi stared at the ground. Then Kwame spoke. "We're not here to punish you," she said softly, "but we're not yours to reclaim either." The woman left in silence. No forgiveness was given. None was asked again. But the village changed after that. The pastor stopped preaching against girls who read too much. Neighbors began to nod respectfully. Children started visiting Mama Chikondi's compound after school, asking for help with homework. People forgot the term bin twins. They called them the Sisters of Dust now, and the dust one was beginning to rise. The day the betrayal came, the sun was unusually bright over Mbale. The rain had stayed away for nearly a week, and the earth cracked in thirst. A soft breeze rustled the banana leaves. But in the village square, the air was thick, waiting. Something unspoken lingered in the wind, as if the ancestors were holding their breath. Dust Gold had grown beyond anything the twins ever imagined. They now employed a small team of other village youth, coders, illustrators, storytellers. Orders from the diaspora poured in, and for the first time, Mbale's name was spoken in places where it had never existed before. A scholarship fund had been set up, a library built. Mama Chikondi had been honored by a university in Nairobi for raising queens from ashes. Everything seemed to be aligning, as if the universe were finally returning what had been stolen. And then came Thabos. He arrived as many threats do, cloaked in admiration. He was a tech entrepreneur from Kampala, smooth-talking, well-dressed, With a voice like honey and teeth too perfect to be trusted, he reached out after their second major interview, saying he wanted to collaborate, to expand Dust Gold into East Africa, to take it global. He offered free workshops, access to international investors, marketing power. Kwame was skeptical. Zuberi was intrigued. He reminds me of men from those city magazines, she said one night as they worked late, her voice low. Kwame's reply was flat. Men like that only smile when they smell power. But Zuberi, ever the dreamer, ever the one to see the light even in knives, believed maybe this time would be different. Maybe they deserved someone to believe in them. Someone with resources and connections who didn't see their past as a stain, but as a story worth lifting. So they let Thabo in. At first, it was simple things: spreadsheets, emails, branding suggestions. He was charismatic and persuasive, flattering Zuberi's designs, praising Kwame's coding with terms like brilliant and rare. But over time, the language shifted. His emails began to say we instead of you. Contracts were rewritten. He encouraged them to form a board. For credibility, he said. Then, subtly, he added names. His people. Kwame sensed the shift and tried to push back. This doesn't feel right, she told Zuberi. We're losing control. But Zuberi hesitated. Maybe control isn't the only thing that matters. Maybe this is what growth looks like. The divide between the sisters, once invisible, started to show. Small arguments stretched longer. Silences sat heavier. And Thabo, like the predator he was, slipped between them. Then came the meeting that broke everything. They were invited to Nairobi for a major investor pitch. Dust Gold had been shortlisted for $1 million social enterprise fund. The girls arrived in secondhand blazers, shoes polished, hands slightly trembling, but when they entered the boardroom, only Thabo was seated at the table. He smiled. You're late. Kwame froze. Where's our presentation? Thabo stood, buttoning his jacket. Our presentation? You mean my company's pitch? It hit like a stone in the chest. On the table lay fresh documents, new branding, new names, with Thabo as the CEO and sole founder. Somehow, through forged papers, technical jargon, and manipulation, he had filed Dust Gold under his name, their mother's curse and miracle, stolen. You used us, Kwame whispered. Thabo chuckled. I built you. Without me, you'd still be writing bedtime stories for village ghosts. Zuberi's voice cracked. You said we were family. And you believed me? He leaned in, eyes gleaming. You're just trash twins from a bin. I just put a bow on it. Security escorted them out. The sisters didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of him. Back in Mbali, the air was different. Rumors had already reached the village. Some left behind closed doors. See? What did you expect from girls like that? Others were heartbroken. Mama Chikondi sat silently, stirring tea that had long gone cold. For 3 days the girls didn't speak, not to each other, not to anyone. On the fourth day, Kwame went missing. Zuberi found her near the river, crouched beside the same trash heap they had been left in so long ago. She was holding the silver ankle chain, now rusted and broken. I was wrong, Zuberi said quietly. Kwame didn't look up. You believed in the dream, and I forgot where the dream came from. Kwame stood, her hands shaking but her spine straight. We may have lost the company, but he can't take the story. He can't take who we are. Zuberi stepped forward. Then we start again. Kwame looked at her sister, and for the first time in weeks, they smiled. It wasn't the end. It was the return. They didn't fight Thabo in court. They didn't try to reclaim Dust Gold. Instead, they took the pain and lit it on fire. A new site, a new platform. This time, decentralized, open source, unstealable. They called it Ash and Ancestry. It wasn't just a marketplace, it was a movement for all children thrown away, all stories buried, all voices silenced by power and polished lies. They told their truth, raw and unfiltered, about the bin, the betrayal, the break. And the world listened. The wind returned to Mbale, soft and cool, as if the land itself exhaled after holding breath for too long. Rain finally came, not as a storm, but as a cleansing drizzle, coating the dry paths and washing over the dusty mango leaves. People watched from behind door frames and veranda benches as the two girls walked through the village side by side, holding nothing but a notebook, a phone, and each other. No celebration greeted them, no cheers, just silence, watchful and unsure. But the silence wasn't cruel this time. It was reverent. Word of ash and ancestrian had spread far quicker than dust gold ever had. Not because of marketing or money, but because it was real, painfully, beautifully real. Their first story was a short animated film titled Thrown Away. Voiced in 3 languages, it followed the life of a baby abandoned in the trash who rose to inspire the world. The narration was soft, haunting, told by Zuberi. Kwame's code stitched the images together, raw and honest, no polish, only soul. Within 2 weeks, it hit 1 million views. Mama Chikandi wept quietly when she watched it on a borrowed smartphone, not because of sadness, but because the girls had taken the ashes of everything they had lost and lit a fire bright enough to be seen across oceans. Messages began to flood in, from children in the slums of Lagos, from girls in rural Zimbabwe, from refugees in Europe, from survivors in America who saw themselves in the twins' journey. They didn't want to buy. They wanted to, belong. And so Ashton Ancestry became a sanctuary, a platform where people uploaded their art, their grief, their stories, even anonymously. And with every voice added, the platform grew, not just in numbers, but in spirit. A month later, Forbes Africa Topics Actions is called. They wanted to feature the girls in a documentary series about change makers from the forgotten corners. Kwame hesitated. Zuberi said yes, but on our terms, she added firmly. This time, they didn't wear borrowed blazers. They wore wraps sewn by women in Mbale, printed with Adinkra and Bantu symbols. Unity, resistance, rebirth. In the interview, they didn't talk about betrayal or revenge. They spoke about resilience, about girls like them who rise, even when the world tells them they belong underground, about how healing doesn't always come from reclaiming what you lost. Sometimes it comes from building something they can never take. Their mother, Amalembeki, watched the documentary alone in a penthouse suite in Johannesburg. Her reflection in the glass window seemed older, more hollow than the glamorous woman in the silver dress all those years ago. When the interviewer asked the girls if they had a message for the woman who birthed them, Kwame said only one thing: "Wherever you are, we hope you're healing too." There was no bitterness in her voice, only release. Back in Mbale, something subtle shifted. People stopped whispering. They started asking. Mothers brought their daughters to Mama Chikandi's compound, not out of pity, but in search of guidance. Boys who once mocked the girls now joined coding lessons. The teacher who used to forget their names now proudly displayed their story in the school library. And one evening, Jabari, the pastor's son, stood at the edge of the compound, hat in hand, head bowed. "I was cruel," he said. "I'm sorry." Kwame didn't nod. She didn't smile. But she said, "You're not the same boy. Neither are we. It's enough." The village, once their prison, had become their proving ground. And now it was becoming their launch pad. Ash and Ancestry received a humanitarian award. They declined a big investor who wanted a controlling share. Instead, they opened an education arm, offering free tech and storytelling classes to underserved youth. The first center? Built in Mbale, under the mango trees. Mama Chikandi sat on her wooden stool beneath those trees, watching her daughters teach children who once feared them. Her eyes were soft, her heart full. "You rose from dust," she murmured again, mostly to herself, "and look what you've become." Years later, The world would call them visionaries. Magazines would rank them among the most influential African women of the decade. Leaders would quote their words at conference. But far from the flashing cameras and grand auditoriums, in a quiet village still nestled between sugarcane fields and red clay roads, two sisters would sit beneath a mango tree every July 17th, the day they were found, and remember. On one such evening, the sky blushed purple as the sun slipped behind the hills. Zuberi was plaiting a young girl's hair, while Kwame tightened the straps of a homemade VR headset on a curious boy. Laughter floated in the breeze. The kind of laughter that sounded like healing. The library they built stood tall behind them, its mural stretching across its side. Painted in bold colors, it showed two baby girls swaddled in a blanket of stars, rising from a trash heap into a sky filled with ancestral faces and glowing fireflies. Below it, written in Swahili, was a single phrase. From what they threw away, we built a world. It hadn't been easy. There were days Kwame still woke with clenched fists, her mind reliving the betrayal, her chest heavy with the echoes of a past that didn't let go easily. There were moments Zuberi still wondered what it would have been like to grow up holding a mother's hand instead of each other's. But healing didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. In the soft thank you from a student, in the unexpected hug from an old neighbor, in the silence that no longer hurt. They never changed their names, not legally, not in their hearts, because the world needed to know who they were, not polished versions, not stories scrubbed of dirt, but truth, whole and burning. Kwame, Zuberi, girls of the trash bin, daughters of Mbale, women of fire. Amale and Becky never came back. But once, 3 years after the Forbes documentary aired, a letter arrived. No return address, just a thin envelope, creased and trembling. Inside, a single note in shaky cursive. I was scared. I was young. I was ashamed. I see you now. I see what I threw away, and I weep every day. Forgive me, if you can. Ahem. They didn't respond, but they kept the letter, not out of love, not even for closure, but as a reminder. People can break, but they can also reach, even if it's from afar. Kwame placed the letter in a wooden box beside their ankle chain, a photo of Mama Chikondi, and the first dust gold sketch Zuberi ever drew. These were their roots. Not trash, not shame, but memory, layered, painful, sacred. On their 10th found day, they hosted a festival in Mbale, not for themselves, but for every child like them. The banners read, "We were never waste." Young girls danced barefoot on the same dirt road where insults once flew. Boys recited poems in honor of their mothers. Elders stood with tears streaming silently, hands on hearts, finally understanding the miracle that had bloomed from neglect.